All right, this is the Coast to Coast Combat Hour. Ed Carbajal, as always, with Matthew Hawkins. We're coming to you after the weekend rather of Bellator 238. We got a new Cyborg picked herself up a new belt. Our past guest Anthony Taylor won his fight. Congratulations to Anthony. I know Matt was in house for that. How you doing, Matt?
Doing all right. Event was fun. News of Kobe Bryant passing on Sunday kind of threw the
Yeah,
weekend off, kind of put me in a daze for the last day and a half.
I think that's everybody, but we'll get into that in a second. We have Daniel Zaldivar returning. He's got a little bit of time to talk with some boxing with us before he hits the road. So how you doing, Daniel? Welcome back.
Thanks again, guys. Happy to be back. Thanks for inviting me on again.
I know a rough time for you guys on the West Coast with the passing of Kobe Bryant. Everybody's been kind of out of it all week. Super Bowl coming up this weekend, and there's really no MMA fights going on that of note. So I mean, you've been busy, Danny. We've been meaning to have you on. I know Wilder Fury's coming, probably the biggest boxing event coming up soon. But you just had Andy Foster on your most recent episode of the podcast. I listened to that today, and I know as far as regulating combat sports, that's probably going to garner you a lot of attention. I actually just listened to it. I know Matt has interest in how the athletic commissions handle things out on the West Coast. So on your podcast, the last round, can you just talk to us about how that went and what you guys covered?
Yeah, sure. So we've been trying to get Mr. Foster, the executive officer of the California State Athletic Commission, on for like the last month or so. We had him scheduled about twice before, but one of the days was actually his birthday, and he was okay to come on, but like I had told my partner Mike, I was like, oh, you know what? Let's just reschedule him for that day because it's his birthday. I don't want him to cancel on us like an hour before. And then like the first time, he just had to reschedule. So luckily, we were able to get him yesterday, this past Monday. He was able to jump on. And like you said, he's a big figure in the fight game, not just the world of boxing, but also MMA. He has to sanction any fight that's in California. And like you said, my show is a boxing show, and of course your guys is primarily MMA. But if any of your listeners, any of your guys' fans, go to my podcast, The Last Round, and want to listen to his interview is very general. He talks about weight cutting. He talks about drug testing. I even asked him about the John Jones situation. I think when the fight was moved to Inglewood, Ed actually gave me all the tips on asking him that beforehand, because I messaged him I think the day before or earlier in that day, and I said, hey, we got Andy Foster. Is there anything you want me to ask him? And he told me, oh, ask him about this. So I was able to kind of ask him about it, and so that was pretty interesting. So if you're a fight fan, it's a pretty good interview to listen to.
Where, in your opinion, where does the California Commission fall on the scale of top commissions in the country? I know for MMA, it's generally, from an outside perspective, I think it's considered one of the top. Is that the same way in boxing?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I don't think you can argue that they're the busiest, just because of the size of our state here in California. He's definitely is the busiest. I've been able to talk to like athletic inspectors and commission reps, being over here in the Los Angeles area, and they've all told me that other states and even other countries like in England and Europe would come to California to study our commission and how they do it over here, pretty much to do like a model. Then I think I was even told that I think they've done some work with New York and North Carolina, where they've come over to try to model after California. I mean,
They need to.
So I mean, of course, I'm not behind that curtain in terms of seeing what they see, but I've been in the fight game, at least the boxing side, quite a few years in terms of the media side. And, not every commission is always going to get everything right. But, with being such a large state with the population that California does, I think they're doing a pretty good job. He had mentioned on our podcast that he's the only state in the United States that has a pension fund for fighters. I completely forgot about that, but he mentioned that towards the end of his interview.
Yeah.
But it's pretty much like a retirement account towards the end. I think you have to vest after 75 rounds. I think that's a pretty interesting factoid in terms of commission for the fight game.
Yeah, man, I found that really interesting. And one thing, I know Matt hasn't heard it yet, but you probably want to check it out, Matt, because one of the things I found most interesting is when he talked about how he got into the position he has. A lot of his background, coincidentally, he came in through as a fan of like first UFC and all that stuff, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and all, and so it was crazy how one of the things he said was as far as dealing with both boxing and MMA, MMA kind of stood out more as far as, I don't want to say the problems, but like when he talked about weight cutting and stuff like that. Obviously, Matt and I have gone back and forth about that. I'm not back and forth, but we've talked about it a lot because, I mean, I don't know how many events have fallen apart or fighters been pulled off of cards in MMA because of being, have a weight cutting issue. And what's the thing? I mean, Matt, you probably know this too. About the 15%. You have to be 15% within the limit or something like that.
I believe in MMA, you have to be prior to the fight. You got to be within 15% of. You can't be more than 15% higher than what you weighed in at. I know Espn lad had an issue with that, and they usually make you move up to the next weight class. I'm not sure if there's a grace period where they give you like a second chance at it. It's still kind of new, but talking weight cutting, it doesn't happen in boxing. Well, I mean, obviously they cut weight in boxing, but we don't see fights canceled anywhere near, at least not the big fights. I don't know if it's happening on some of these undercard fights, but do you just think that's because of the smaller weight classes, or is it just more of a thing where people are signing up and going, hey, let's just fight and not kill ourselves to get to that weight?
Well, Andy Foster did mention that there is a big, disparity between boxing and MMA in terms of weight cutting. He did mention that MMA is a lot, in terms of the weight cut, it's pretty much a lot worse. I don't think that's the word he used, so don't quote me on that. But that's essentially what he was describing it as, is that the weight cuts for MMA fighters, and I'm sure you guys know this, I know Ed knows this for sure, but is a lot more drastic than it is for boxers. So I thought that was interesting, even though I kind of already had an idea about that, especially since knowing Ed over the years. But that 15% thing, he did touch on that. I'm not sure if it's like set in stone, like if it's a state code yet, because he did mention something about it's in committee or it's going through some process or something. But but I think it's a very good rule to have, especially in a commission as large as California, especially for the fighters' safety and the fighters' health. I mean, we've seen in other places weight cuts just turn out bad, so I think it works out.
Yeah, well, one of the things I think the reason why we don't see it so much in boxing is because they have more weight classes than MMA.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So there's he said something about how that you can get fighters to agree upon, another weight class or something to that effect, it's usually it's more of a problem because of the limitations of the weight classes in MMA. Again, I just heard it hours ago because I know you that episode went live today or yesterday, right?
It was like last night, this morning, so about maybe 1 a.m. your time on the East Coast, so about this morning.
So I don't know. I mean, that you would think that'd be an argument for more weight classes. I mean, I forget your stance on it, Matt, when we've talked about it. But I mean, are you like you're down for a 165 and more weight classes? Are you or no?
In a sense, I am. Where it makes sense, I could see it. I think the issue with MMA, different boxing, is that so much of MMA's base comes from wrestling. A lot of the younger guys are wrestlers, so they have the history of cutting weight. I know, like Tito Ortiz, for example, basically established at the time the 199 weight class, and the weight class was essentially made for him. And anybody who's met Tito Ortiz, that guy's 235, 240, easy. So he's been cutting 25 to 40 pounds basically his whole career to get down to the to the 199, which now became 205 in the latter years. So I think the wrestling, I think people will always try to cut the limits and keep cutting. I think I don't know. I don't know if more weight classes helps. I don't know if you just sign for a 155 fight and then you basically can't weigh more than 170. I mean, I don't know. I don't really know how you get around it. And we saw it with the Connor and Cowboy thing, and obviously the fight didn't last long, so we don't necessarily know how that affected their cardio and their well-being. But they both hit the scales, looked good, had no complaints. I just feel like that's the origin of MMA fighting, was open weight, and you fought at your weight, and you fought, and obviously that's changed over the last 2 decades. But I don't know. We've said it before. I think it's going to take somebody dying, a big name dying on the scales, and then all of a sudden there'll be this massive overhaul, or it'll go in front of Congress, and it'll be a kind of the steroid thing with baseball and betting thing with basketball and all that stuff. All of a sudden it'll blow up, and then we'll kind of all look at each other and go, hey, well, we've been saying it for 20 years now, and it took a world champion dying on the scales because he was trying to make, trying to cut 40 pounds. But I don't know. I think there should be I'd like a 225, maybe a 230, just to kind of even out the heavyweights. Maybe do every 10 pounds. Do a 20, a 30, 40, 50, 160, 170. Add one. But if you have, I don't want to get into where we have boxing, where we have a weight class every 3 pounds. I think that there's not enough MMA yet in this world, I don't think, for that. I think if the UFC had 45 title belts, I think we would start seeing some pretty undeserving champions in a lot of the weight classes.
Yeah, I mean, there's arguments for and against it, especially in MMA. I know Connor is actually for it. He mentioned it in one of his interviews before his return, that he mentioned everything we're talking about, how there's less folks missing weight and less bad things happening because of the more weight classes that are in boxing. Obviously, he since his time with the Maymac whole thing, which Daniel did cover briefly back in whenever that was 2017, back when we were together at another site. He everybody had a good time covering that, and his time in boxing obviously opened it, probably has him wanting more options in boxing. But speaking of more options in boxing, I know 2019 was a pretty big year for boxing, as far as the whole Andy Ruiz thing, and now we're getting Wilder Fury 2. I forget if they fought at the beginning of 2019, right, or the end of they fought.
It was December 2018.
2018, so it was right at the end of the year. So we kind of waited a whole year for that. And did you get to go to the? I know you had mentioned you were going to go to the latest media event that they had for that build up. Did you get to go to that, Daniel?
Yeah. So they've had 2 press conferences within the last few weeks out here in LA. They had one at the Staples Center LA Live area, and then they had a secondary one at the Fox Studio lot in LA this past Saturday. My partner Mike from the Last Round podcast and I went to go cover that on Saturday. And I don't know if any of your listeners or you guys caught maybe the highlights or a little bit of it. It was pretty the biggest difference between that, this press conference and any other press conference, is it was held in a television studio. And these press conferences are never, I mean, you guys know, they're never really held in television studios like that. They never really invite the media. So that was the biggest difference. Other than that, both fighters were pretty cordial with each other. There wasn't really any back and forth controversial banter. But it was an interesting. They're trying to promote it, and my team, we were able to get some good solid interviews, like 4 or 5 of them for our content. So yeah, I mean, it's still an intriguing matchup. The rematch was exciting, especially the last 2 rounds. So I think everybody's hoping that the rematch is going to be even more exciting.
It just doesn't seem like there's a lot of fanfare for such a fight that was such a big deal, though. I feel like we'd be talking about it more as we're coming into the month of February. I mean, is it crazy out by you guys? I mean, I don't know. What's your take on it? Me and Matt haven't really talked boxing since you were last on.
Mm-hmm. No, I agree. But we had on that past Saturday, we had a reporter from ESPN. His name's Steve Kim. He was on. We had interviewed him for a good 20-25 minutes right there at the Fox Studio lot. And I think I brought up that point in terms of promotion, and his take was that he was just, and he's been in the game since like the 90s. So his take was that he's like, look, like the buzz around this fight, he was like, you won't start feeling it until probably like the week up, fight week. He was like, or especially after maybe this weekend, because there's rumors that they might promote it on the Super Bowl, because I think Super Bowl is on Fox, I believe.
Yes, it is.
And then, for your listeners that don't know, Tyson Fury is with ESPN and Deontay Wilder is with Fox. So this is actually a joint promotion. It's a joint promotional pay-per-view that they've been utilizing both platforms. So, there's no buzz. I mean, there is buzz, but it's more for the hardcore fans. But I don't think you'll start seeing maybe that casual fan buzz until it gets closer. Hopefully after this weekend, if they utilize the Super Bowl airtime or any of that time for that promotion, because that'd be huge, because that's like, 30 million viewers who watch the Super Bowl every year. So they'd be stupid not to, but who knows? So we'll see how it turns out.
Yeah, I think that might be the kind of the way of the future. I don't think we're going to see these 6-month build-ups like we had for like McGregor, Aldo, and some of these other mega fights. It seems like we were saying the same thing about the Conor Cowboy fight, how there really wasn't much talk about it until basically the week of the fight. So I think people's attention spans are so small right now, and there's so much other content in combat sports that you almost don't want to get lost promoting too soon. You'd rather just kind of own that last week with as much content as you have.
Right. Yeah, I completely agree with that. And then another interesting thing for this fight is that Bob Arum, who's obviously one of the most famous promoters in the fight game, he has his company Top Rank, had mentioned before when this fight got announced that they weren't going to do any press conferences or anything like that. They were just going to utilize on the machine behind ESPN and Fox, like their reach. He was like, we're going to use the college football and all that stuff. And then the last couple weeks, they've done 2 press conferences out here in LA. So, I mean, you can kind of read between the lines. Does that mean they're not getting the buzz that they want, or maybe ticket sales are slow? I mean, who knows? I think we'll find out, obviously, as the event draws near. But I thought that was kind of an interesting observation.
You know what's interesting? You talk about how they might get ads during the Super Bowl. Not that long ago, maybe 3 weeks ago, Endeavor just partnered or picked up or bought a company that does a lot of I forget the name of it, but like that week that they announced that they got in business with this company that runs a lot of like holiday ads and travel destination type of deals that's affiliated with the NFL. That's very same week they ran ads. They were running ads for McGregor Cerrone on whatever football game was on that weekend. So I wouldn't be surprised if you see both the upcoming UFC with John Jones and Dominic Reyes and that Tyson Fury Deontay Wilder run across. I mean, everybody wants that's for like I don't watch football, but I mean I tune into the Super Bowl and everybody knows that herbs like me that don't watch football. We tune in to check out the commercials. So everybody wants ad space on the Super Bowl. But for because we're probably going to do our picks for the UFC next week, Matt. Who do you like in this boxing in the Fury Wilder 2?
If you're asking me, I think I like Fury. I think he'll keep his distance. I think basically fight kind of like he did the first fight, but end up keeping his guard up for the last couple rounds. And I think he squeaks out a decision. I know Wilder's knocked out his last couple of guys pretty brutally, but the last fight against Ortiz, it was kind of a slow, lackadaisical first 4 or 5 rounds, if I recall, and then he just unloaded. So I think if he kind of takes off, or not necessarily takes off, but if he comes out a little slow, I think it's rounds he's going to give away to Fury. And I mean, the last fight Fury wins by 3 or 4 points if he doesn't go down go down 2 times in the last couple rounds, and maybe not 4 points, but a couple rounds he ends up winning that fight by. So that's kind of how I see it. I think he'll fight smart, he keep his movement going, and just avoid the giant punch.
And what about you, Daniel? I mean, you want to give us a little preview of what you're probably going to do a full in-depth one on your own podcast that week of?
Yeah, sure. I mean, usually we do our fight picks the week of fights.
Mm-hmm.
So obviously we got a couple weeks before we make a decision. And honestly, if I had a decision on who I'd pick, I tell you guys right now, I had no problem with it. But honestly, I really don't know.
Mm.
And the reason why is because like there was one statement that Wilder has said in the last couple of months, because people like Matt has been saying, like, you know, Fury has that better boxing ability, has the better boxing skills, but Wilder has that unreal God-given power, you know, and Fury outweighs him by like 40 something pounds, 50 pounds on fight night. But Wilder just has that freakish power that, you know, not many people have in the fight game in general. And he did make a comment which was very interesting, because he's right on the money, where he said it was just like, my opponents need to be perfect for, you know, 36 minutes or whatever.
Yeah.
He was like, I only need to be perfect for 2 seconds.
Yeah, he says that a lot.
And I remember when he first said that, I was like, you know what, that's a very simple statement, but it totally defines him. So he's pretty much saying, like, look, I might not have the boxing skills. He's like, but that's not what I need. He was like, I just need to catch you and I win. And I mean, he's been proving that. I mean, yeah, with Fury got back up that first fight, but I mean, who's to say that Wilder's already proven that he can knock him down twice.
Yeah.
So, you know, I don't think anybody can doubt that he can knock him out. So I don't know who yet. I'm hoping to have a decision by the time fight week comes around, though.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going Wilder just because I'm a fan of someone that at least tries to finish. I mean, not that Fury doesn't try to finish, but you know, Wilder strikes me as a finisher, so I'm going in on Deontay Wilder, even though I don't like when he yells "Bomb Squad" and scares the shit out of everybody. but
it's pretty wild, yeah.
It's
wild being there.
I mean, I've heard it around here in New York when he's fought out here. So, and it's when he did it in the what was it, when he yelled it a couple of years ago? They did a media thing in the Empire State Building. He scared the shit out of everybody that was standing around there. It was a long time ago, like back when you and I were working together. But I was like, Jesus, that guy's loud. But anyway, I mean, I know you got to get going, man. So before you leave, obviously when you can just hang up, and then me and Matt will finish up with our recap from the weekend. But if you just want to go ahead and let folks know where to listen to the podcast, where to follow you on social. And what you got coming up, go right ahead.
Yeah, guys, I appreciate you guys inviting me on once again. You know, I'm always here to be your resident boxing expert when you need something. My podcast is the Last Round Podcast. As I mentioned earlier, we're primarily a boxing podcast, but there are times like this week where we have the Athletic Commission from California, the executive officer, Andy Foster, on, which it's an interview that appeals to every fight fan, MMA and boxing. So, and if any of your listeners, any of your guys' fans want to know more about the behind the scenes of the commission, especially coming from the main guy from the California State Athletic Commission, it's a good 40-minute interview that we had with him where he talks about all the weight cuts, and it applies to MMA and boxing. So, and if I'm sure you have some listeners who are MMA and boxing fans. So, if you're looking for a good boxing podcast, I think we do pretty well, and we try to deliver some pretty solid guests throughout the year. So as I said, thanks again for having me on, guys.
Hey, before you run, just one quick question here. We had the issue in MMA with Stephen A. Smith last week, giving his comment on Donald Cerrone. Real quick, MMA fans and MMA world need to grow thicker skin, or Stephen A. Smith shouldn't be involved? I'm asking you because after every boxing match, boxing fans have to hear every schmo in the world saying that boxing's fixed. What do they? What?
It's funny that you mentioned that, because my co-host Mike despises the guy. Yesterday when we were recording, after and before.
Yay, Mike.
Mike, like, he was just venting to me about the guy, and every time he vents to me about him, when Stephen A. Smith is involved in some type of boxing related show for ESPN or whatever, I just laugh. And he's just like, "What are you laughing at?" I was just like, "Because you're so affected by it." Like, I'm in. I look. It doesn't bother me. It doesn't bother me because I know the guy's doing it because it gets attention. Why do you think that this recently the last contract he signed for ESPN was like? I think he's like the highest paid ESPN employee they have.
Mm-hmm.
He's making tens of millions of dollars. Why? Because he gets ratings. You don't think he knows that he yells, he gets crazy, he does all these random opinions, he calls out people. I wouldn't be surprised that some of these opinions that he spills out every day for all these different sports, I wouldn't be surprised if some of them are just fake. He just does them for the publicity.
Oh yeah.
So it doesn't bother me. I just think it's hilarious because, I can't hate on the guy. I can't hate on the guy because, if he's talking about our sport, he's a mainstream sports figure in media. So and I mean, you guys know boxing is a niche sport. I can admit that probably MMA is essentially we have a bigger fan base at the moment. So when he talks about boxing, even if he's like criticizing us, hey man, I'm cool with it because he's a mainstream figure that has all these eyeballs in him. So it doesn't bother me, but to people like my co-host Mike and obviously a lot more people, he gets under their skin. So, but sure I think it's kind of hilarious.
Yeah.
All right. So basically, in summary, MMA fans should get a little bit thicker skin, but Stephen A. Smith's a goon.
I mean, I don't want to tell people how to live their lives, but if you want to, if
you're always telling me how to live my life.
Oh, that's different though. You do it different.
All right, Danny. Well, thanks for that. Yeah, I mean, we'd like to have you on sooner than later again, just so we can break into some more stuff, especially maybe after the Fury Wilder fight. And I'd like to talk to you about more of the prospects and stuff coming up in the world of boxing, people that we can start looking out for in the near future. So thanks for joining us again. Appreciate it.
You got it, guys. Thanks again.
Cool. Take care, man. I'll talk to you later. Cool. All right, so that was Daniel Zaldivar of the Last Round podcast, returning to talk boxing once again. He had to catch a train, so sorry for rushing us into it, but I didn't want him to miss his train. I know what it's like to have to catch trains and buses and shit living in Jersey and going to New York. So, but yeah, man, so Bellator 238, man, I know you were there.
Great event.
Yeah.
Like I said in the intro of the show, had a blast. Got there for the opening bout of the night. Opening bout was a fun scrap between a couple youngsters, and then Anthony Taylor picked up a very close decision win over Chris Avila in a fairly back and forth fight. I know Taylor's.
We were kind of talking during it. I mean, even though for folks listening, a lot of times when Matt's at stuff, he and I will still message each other. Even when I'm at stuff. If I see him messaging me on the phone, we'll talk about what's going on as it's happening live. So, what was the take as far as like when being there in the arena? Did the crowd feel like he got robbed? I didn't really hear any boos.
No, I think everybody thought it was a close fight. My cousin with me thought it was a draw before they announced it, and then the first card they actually announced was a 28-28 draw. So, they both had some good moments. They both had some moments that they can work on. I think Taylor could admit that he probably needs to continue to work on his cardio a little bit. I mean, at least I don't know how he felt, but that's kind of what it looked like from the outside. But I thought it was good for him to get a win. I was happy for the guy. And then he made ESPN and stuff with his people's elbow celebration at the end. So we talk about him promoting. Dude came out dancing like Ravishing Rick Rude down the aisle.
Oh man, I wish they showed that. I think you told me that the next day or something, and I was like, oh man. And that should have been on ESPN too, his whole WWE thing. But The Rock even retweeted that video that ESPN shared of him doing the people's elbow. So I actually spoke to him the next day. The following morning, we were messaging each other, and he was obviously on cloud nine after all the attention just from all that. One thing I got to say, though, and it too, because we've had him. He's been on. I've spoken to him a bunch of times. We've had him on the podcast twice. I mean, he's definitely from as an outsider, someone that's watched his career, I could see his apprehension as far as going for those takedowns and being concerned with the submission game. Obviously, all of his losses that he's had, or most of his losses that he's had, were by submission. But I mean, when he finally said, screw it, there's a round left, I got to do something. He put himself in danger and he defended all the sub attempts, escaped in arm bars. I was actually really concerned when his back got taken, and he spun out of that pretty well. So you could tell he's focused on everything he did wrong years ago, and he's evolved. So it says a lot for him. I know there's folks hating on the fight or whatever, but I mean, after watching his, it's just crazy when you watch a fighter that's from their first pro fight to a few fights in and how they've grown. I mean, I'm actually pretty proud of the kid.
Yeah, no, I mean, like you said, he's always been open to coming on the show. First time we spoke to him, I spoke to him on the here. I caught the WWE vibe and actually asked him about that. So it's kind of been funny to see how that's kind of developed and good for him.
Yeah.
I mean, he fought on the second night of the fight on a Bellator prelim, and he was on ESPN's Twitter. I don't know if he was on ESPN. I don't know if they showed it on SportsCenter or any of that stuff.
Yeah.
But like you said, he's got The Rock retweeting him. He's fighting the second bout of the night on a 15, 16 fight card. Good for him. Look forward to watching him fight again. You got this fight out of the way. I know it was kind of a grudge match for him. So
yeah, I was gonna try to get him on back as a winner for this week, but he's actually in Japan now. So I don't know if that's the thing they do that he likes to do. I know he's told us how he likes traveling. So we'll definitely get to talk to him. Obviously he's a friend of the podcast, so he'll definitely be back. Hopefully with another Bellator announcement soon.
Yeah, I mean, when we talked to him, I said he should be fighting for Ryzen, or he should get a fight with Ryzen with Bellator. So, I mean, maybe if he's smart, he's knocking on some doors while he's out there and introducing himself to some people with the new, he's got the backing. I think he'd kill it in Japan.
Oh yeah.
The character that he brings to the fight game.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, again, big win for him. Former UFC fighter Curtis Millender, former Bellator fighter before UFC, returned, picked up a dominating decision. Young JJ Wilson, who I believe is 22 years old, came into his bout 4-0. He moves to 5-0 with another stoppage. I think he'll be a name that we'll be looking at in the next 2-3 years as far as a top contender for Bellator. He had a little bit of he fought through a little bit of he had some tough moments in the fight, but he fought through them and like I said, ended up getting the finish. I'd say the biggest win of the night for anybody was Aaron Pico. I feel like his career was basically on the line in this bout. He came into the fight 4-3, only fighting top level competition essentially. And he picked up a knockout win over Daniel Carey. Carey was coming off of the finish of Gaston Bolaños. So another good competition for Pico, and picked up a devastating knockout. Like I said, if he would have lost this fight, I don't think there would have been anywhere for him to go. But back to the drawing board, and I don't think we would have saw Pico I think he would have been on the small regional scene for a while fighting.
Yeah, and it's funny that you're talking about that because even there's folks that I knew that were there covering the event, so I watched their uploads of the post-fight presser, and then that was one of the things they asked Scott Coker about, and even Scott Coker said, "Yeah, I mean, he looked great. He did great tonight, but we're definitely going to take our time, still developing him, just because it's been so 50-50 with the kid. But the thing is, he's young. What is he? 22, 23?
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, so he's got so much time to grow into the fighter that he can be. I mean, I still think he can be a world champion. He's humble, he's smart, he handles his losses like a man, super mature for his age. So I think I think we're gonna see definitely gonna see more of him. We just need him to start growing the W side of his record, way past the losses side.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I think skill wise he's a 10 in striking and wrestling. I think he's got the skills of a world champion. I just think we watched him try to hone those skills against competition that was more seasoned. And had he been doing this on the regional circuit, we'd probably be looking at an Aaron Pico who's already fought 10, 11 times now and undefeated. and we'd be talking about him signing with Bellator or the UFC. So I think that's it. I mean, the main concern wasn't so much the 3 losses; it was that he was getting KO'd in some of those and getting put out. No matter what your age is, I think if for some reason he would have got caught in this fight, it would have been hard to rebound back from. I mean, all of a sudden you start having commissions and stuff looking into you. The world of MMA starts breathing down your neck when you start suffering that many KOs. So he was just wrestling early in the fight, kind of fought conservative, and then once he got to the feet and had his opponent kind of wary of a takedown, it seems like that's when he unloaded. So another knockout. I love watching the guy fight. Like you said, if that's Coker's plan, then I think that's a good move. Another guy I wouldn't mind seeing go to Ryzen, getting a fight out there. Ryzen's got some good guys, but they also got some guys that they could feed to a Pico, and also still give him the chance to fight in front of a big crowd.
Yeah, no, I hear you.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
We're not reinventing the wheel here when we talk about some of this stuff. They give him a pro wrestler. I don't, you know what I mean? Just, it's all about experience for somebody that age right now. So that's it. But huge win for him. Main card kicked off. Emily King picked up a upset win over Ava Knight. I don't know how much of an upset. Knight's the boxing champion who was 1-0 in MMA. She came in and really showed her weakness on the ground. Emily King picked up the win.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the ground game is new to her, and she got submitted, but she defended and escaped a couple before that happened. I know a lot of people. She seemed to be. I mean, obviously, no one's going to be happy when they lose this on TV, or the Zone or whatever the hell people are watching on. But she seemed to say oh, the haters are going to come. I don't know if there seems to be this weird, and it's fun. It's too bad that Daniel had to leave, but he's probably one of the few people that I don't get this weird vibe of anti-MMA fandom. And she's the third or fourth or fifth woman now to come over from boxing into MMA and make a go of it. I think she deserves credit for that. She's pretty adamant about not stopping. I admire that she wants to keep on with MMA when she could. I mean, I don't know how they talk about the pay disparity in women's boxing. It's obviously not the same as the men and stuff like that. Amanda Serrano, Heather Hardy have all been vocal about that. So, I mean, that's a whole nother podcast in itself. But I mean, she still deserves credit for coming out. I wouldn't mind seeing her again. I mean, maybe if Heather Hardy wants to do MMA again, maybe have them face each other. I mean, there's something to be said for them. Stepping out of their comfort zones and doing something where they know they're probably going to lose in their first few fights, but they still go at it anyway. So I like the fight. I mean, I know. Was there how many Kings were on this card? I know we were screwing around with Nolan last week.
No, that's the amazing thing. So they didn't have their pictures, and when we made a joke about Nolan King about how they must be related, I made a joke about how they look alike, so they must be related. Turns out they were married. I don't know if you picked up on that. So it was actually husband and wife.
They said it during the broadcast. Actually, they talked about the whole thing when she won her fight. They cut to her husband backstage, waiting for his fight and celebrating and happy about it. And then when he obviously he fought Raymond Daniels and he didn't do so good. So.
Yeah. The wife carried the load and they were celebrating, but that was, like you said, was short lived. Raymond Daniels disposes of Jason King 3 minutes into round one. Axe kick after spinning kick after side kick after Kung Fu Joe move after Kung Fu Joe move. Yeah, exactly.
So it was like they cut to her during the broadcast. I mean, I know you were there live. You're all over the place when you're in the arena. I know you don't really. I mean, when you watch fights out there anyway, you couldn't really do that out here because Madison Square Garden security is all fucking, strict about it. But they cut to the wife. She was watching, she was actually in the arena watching, and when he lost the way that he did, she had to be consoled by her coach because it was. I mean, obviously he lost pretty bad.
Yeah,
So.
no, I did catch that though. I caught that out of my corner of my eye that they decided to show on the big screen in the arena her crying on somebody's shoulder. But I mean, obviously that's got to be emotional, especially coming off of a huge win for you, and then I mean a matter of within 10 minutes the
Yeah.
momentum shift.
Would have been nice if they both won, but I mean that's.
If I don't know a lot about Jason.
But they put him against Raymond Daniels.
Yeah, I mean, when the fight, I said, hey, if he's got any kind of wrestling submission skills like his wife, then they could have could be celebrating some stuff tonight. But I mean, Raymond, it's got to be scary to be in that cage with Raymond Daniels when you're hurt. I mean, when I can't even comprehend what must be going through your mind when he's hitting you with stuff that you just don't see coming over
especially when he comes with so much of it. I mean, like everyone's like, okay, he's a kickboxer, he's a striker, so then you got to pressure him, and don't give him his range and grind him against defensive takedowns. But if he comes at you, like we said, like a video game fighting character, it's easier said than done, and the thing about his striking is he's a smart striker. He's not just a headhunter. He attacks the soft tissue. I mean, he confuses the hell out of. Last Thursday, I don't know if I've talked about it. I know you know about it, but I've talked about it on the podcast before. I haven't done any striking, sparring, or MMA outside of jiu-jitsu, but like as far as striking, I haven't done any training since I tore my pec in 2016. So I just started doing it again last Thursday, and Nate Ray, I sparred with him. He competes amateur MMA, did a couple of fights to win pros. And he's 155 pounds, but even just moving around, not being used to it, being away from it from 4 years, 4 or 5 years, 4 years. Yeah, I hadn't sparred in 4 years, and I was completely lost. So it was weird watching. Not that King was lost against Daniels, but I'm just saying that the comparisons, they're light years apart. But I mean, someone as such a seasoned striker like Daniels, just firing away at him. I mean, he probably didn't even have time to think about, let me grab a single leg or something,
No, and he lands them. That's what's different than Daniels and a lot of guys is. I mean, we got guys in the UFC flipping off the cage and doing crazy stuff, but they're not landing anything. It's more show. It's more. I mean, he's throwing tornado punches and he's landing them. I mean, these kicks he's throwing, he's running away from a guy and all of a sudden he throws some crazy, I don't even know the terms for all the kicks, but he throws some crazy spinning back kick and he lands it on the guy's liver. I mean, it's like, it's not just for show. And that's what's crazy. And I mentioned it. It seems like we're still light years away from the potential, but my God, him and MVP at 170.
That's got to happen. Yeah.
I mean, you talk about a video game experience in an MMA fight. I can't. I mean, that's up there with fights that I'd wish to see. And I don't know. It would depend, I imagine, where it happened. But Daniels has the kickboxing experience, so we're less likely to see a commission try to say, "Hey, he's only got 3 MMA fights." But my God, that would be a fun one. But so that was a big win for Daniels. Up until this point, Bellator pretty much had, I think, things going the way they wanted to. I think they would have liked to see Neva Knight win, but that was probably lower on their totem pole. But with Pico winning, Daniels winning, Sergio Pettis then was the next fight. He picked up a devastating win, submission win, after dropping his opponent. I think it was another first round, so really the fight was never in question. Pettis did his thing. First stoppage, it seems like, in a while. Without glancing at his record, I can't really honestly recall the last one he had. So that was good to see. And I think with him signing with Bellator, this was a fight obviously he had to win if he wants to work his way into the 135-pound weight class. And without a champion in that division, he's got the name value. Seems like he starts to slip into a spot here pretty soon. If we got Mix, we got Gallagher. Other than it's pretty thin.
No, you're right, and that's one of the things. Again, at the post-fight media scrum with Scott Coker, that's one of the other questions that he fielded was, with that win and him new there, where does he fit in? And Coker, obviously he doesn't want to rush him, but he was like, he's definitely on the radar of that whole conversation. So, good for him.
Yeah, no, a big win. Like you said, the arena's rolling right now. Everybody's happy. Fights are looking good. Like I said, Daniels, and then Pettis, and then we got the fight that I thought was gonna be the fight of the
Yeah.
early fight of the year, and seems like I put the mush on that. Juan Archuleta picks up a decision over Henry Corrales.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, not what I expected.
No.
Maybe something I should start to expect more with Archuleta. I've been at a couple of his fights where he's gotten huge knockouts, so maybe that was a little bit. Maybe that's swayed how I was looking at his fights, but he's starting to have a little bit of more of a traction of being a little bit of more of a slow down fighter. I know the people in the arena were not happy with him. Most people sitting around me were not rooting for him. And they, if you only watch the Pitbull fight and maybe a couple of his other fights, that might sway your opinion, considering that last fight was in LA as well. But
I mean, I think it's the case of when we had Nolan on, all three of us were kind of like, yeah, this could be fight of the year contender. But I think you have a case with two guys like that where, again, like we had talked about last week, and how certain fighters can cancel each other's skill set out. And when you get guys that are so similar, I think we just saw a dual case of extreme aggressive caution. You know what I mean? So
yeah, no, I see that. I guess I always figured that there's going to be some kind of sense of urgency. And I would have thought maybe more on Corrales' side, coming off of the loss to Caldwell, and he doesn't have the. I would say Archuleta's higher up on the rungs right now as far as a little bit of name value coming off the title fight, and I kept waiting for there to be like an explosion, and it was like, it's the typical fight where the last 10 seconds they're waving each other on to like, let's do this, and obviously, I mean, I'll still watch Archuleta fight, I'll still watch Corrales fight in the future, but just disappointing. But Archuleta picks up the win and what essentially could be a alternate bout for the tournament. I don't think he's got a lot of people. I mean, he got booed out of the arena. So.
Oh wow! I gotta say, man, you were there. That's a good thing you were there, because a lot of that just wasn't. It's not something that I caught on as watching at home.
They booed the decision. They booed him walking out of the cage, and they booed him walking out of the arena. I mean, he got booed out of the arena basically. Wow. He played it up a little to the crowd and stuff, but. It could be good, it could be bad, but I think in his next fight he's going to have to reestablish himself as somewhat of a killer if he wants to keep hanging with some of these other guys. Somebody who's been criticized fought in the next bout, the quarterfinal for the featherweight tournament. I've been a little bit on Caldwell. I was a little bit one of his naysayers, I guess, saying that he was kind of just had become a wrestler without not looking for finishes and stuff, and proved me wrong in this fight. Put down Borix and submitted him 2 minutes into the fight. Looked outstanding. Looked like the Caldwell that we kind of always we knew was there, but and it might have just been a matter of running into Horiguchi twice in a row, and then basically wanting to get his feet under him and grinding out a win over Corrales in the opening bout of the tournament. But a great performance, big win for him, and I'll tell you what, that finish got me excited for the AJ McKee fight.
Yeah, man. I mean, not for nothing, I can't disagree with anything you said, but it was definitely I did pick Caldwell to win, and I personally just think maybe the 135 might be too rough for him as he gets older or whatever the case is, but I mean, I thought it would have been more of a longer fight, but yeah, man, I was super impressed. And like you said, when they had him face off, I saw someone tweet. I don't know if you caught it while you were there, that because McKee was walking around the arena, they said he was walking with a cane. Did you see that?
No, I didn't. I didn't even see he was in the arena until he came into the cage. I didn't get down to the floor, so it wasn't as easy for me to see kind of the whole scene. I know there was a lot of people there, but no, I didn't catch that.
But he said he was fine, that he's going to be fine for when he has to fight again and stuff. He just might have been sore or tweaked something. Obviously, he looked fine when they faced off in the cage. But yeah, man, that's definitely that's going to be a great fight to see. I mean, we'll do our picks for that when the time comes. But I mean, I just because it's crazy, because I've I've interviewed both guys. I've seen them both fight, and I'm super impressed with both of them. But if I were to make a pick now, I just feel like McKee might be because Caldwell's strength is his wrestling. He used it to grind out the victory and the submission in that fight that you just talked about. But I just feel like McKee's got the tools to handle that, and I just think he might have more ways to win. But we can talk about that when it happens.
Yeah, no, I tend to agree with your initial ideas on that fight, but like you said, we'll get to that. That brought us to the main event of the night. Basically a women's super fight, a true 145-pound championship fight for the Bellator featherweight title. Chris Cyborg signed with Bellator, came in, fight Julia Budd. Budd, who had been on a long win streak and had been the Bellator champ for a few years. I think I called TKO like 2.5 rounds, something like that. Ended up going to the 4th round where Cyborg put together a video game style combination, eventually dropping her with a body shot and having the fight waved off. Fun fight. Crowd liked that fight. I was into it start to finish. Thought Cyborg basically won every round. There might have been a round in there, I can't recall, maybe the 2nd round, where it was Bud might have done a couple things, basically kind of holding Cyborg up against the cage, throwing some knees in the clinch and such. But, Cyborg's just Cyborg. She's one of the great MMA fighters of our time and of the sport's history. And she becomes a Grand Slam for 4 championship belts and 4 of the biggest organizations in MMA history.
And not for nothing, man. You've had some. You've put your ass in some significant seats in arenas when it comes to Cyborg. Because if you look at, I know I've mentioned on the podcast before, there's a nice blog you wrote over at the site that I own, the blog board Jungle, where you wrote about the Carano Cyborg fight. So, I don't know if it's hit you yet or if that came across your own mind. You've had you've sat in some significant history of Cyborg fights as it pertains to women's MMA. She picked up her 4th title in the sport. Right? That's Invicta, Strikeforce, UFC, and Belt. Yeah, it's 4. So, with you watching in the span of her career, you've been there for some significant fights and watching her fight. And, I hate to say it, because you called her to win earlier. She kind of picked it up later. I don't know if she just had to get the feel with Bud. Because let's not take anything away from Julia Budd, who was a solid champ while she was there until Cyborg came along. I wouldn't mind if they did a women's featherweight Grand Prix. Cyborg seems to be all for it. I wouldn't mind if they threw Bud back in the mix. But Arlene Blenko probably. Scott Coker said it afterward. She's definitely the #1 contender. So if they're not going to do a Grand Prix, then Blenko's got to get her shot against Cyborg. But women's GOAT of MMA.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. I don't know if she is above Nunes. Nunes obviously has the win over her, but they're both. We start talking. They're the 1-2. And then Rousey is probably a distant 3. But you can't take away anything from Ronda either. I feel like we look in hindsight, but she did her thing for a good portion of time and finished off a lot of good fighters. Yeah. I've been able to see Cyborg fight. I forget how many times, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. I think I've seen maybe her fight 10 times live now, 9 times. So I've seen Cyborg's career. I've seen her win 2 of those belts, the Strikeforce and now the Bellator one. I saw her lose the belt to Nunes. How did she get the belt in UFC? I might have been at that fight too. Did she get that in the Holly Holm fight? Or no, she had it before that. She got it against Tanya Evinger.
Yeah, they fought for the inaugural part 2.
Yeah, it was supposed to be Megan Anderson, and then she fought Evinger. So I was at that fight too. So I saw her win all 3 of her belts. Other than the Invicta one, she won at the fight before I saw her fight. So she's been a major part of me as a fan, enjoying the fights, and she has a huge fan base out here. And I know she has a checkered past as far as some of the drug tests and stuff, but she seems like a really good person. I don't really hear anybody ever say anything bad about her. I know she helps out around the community and stuff.
Oh yeah, definitely
So,
nice lady.
that's the kind of stuff that I really look at. Everybody's made mistakes, and especially when she failed, we were still in a kind of a dark ages time of MMA when she takes a beat because she's a female, and maybe rightfully so. But if we threw away every MMA fighter that tested positive, our history of MMA would have started in about 2015. So big win for her. Excited for it again. Bellator announced a big show. I was predicting it for September 9th. San Jose Bader versus Vadim Nemkov for the light heavyweight belt. I'm wondering if that's where they slide Caldwell, AJ McKeon as a co-main event, because we have the two other semifinals coming up in early March, correct?
March 13th. Yeah.
So that would be 2 months
Friday
after.
the 13th. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the last thing Bellator needs is to have an event on Friday the 13th. God knows you're gonna end up with like 4 shots to the nuts, cancel fight after cancel.
As long as I was gonna say, as long as they don't book it, please don't put Roy Nelson on that card in that arena. I mean, the poor guy's had enough. Like he's had such. He even said, I interviewed him. It's on this MMA News' YouTube channel actually, where he says I think there's a curse and I'm affected by it. I mean, he was joking, but I don't know, man. You know how I am about curses. I think Barclays Center is cursed for MMA. So, but
yeah, no, I hear you there. And like you said, you told Danny, we don't really have any events coming up this weekend. We have the Super Bowl, and as we started off saying earlier, the sports world taken back by the loss of Kobe. Brian, I think that if anything, kind of. I've kind of taken that as for me growing up out here, a lot of my history with my dad who passed almost 20 years ago was watching the Lakers. So I have a lot of memories. He loved Kobe Bryant. So there's a lot of personal stuff there for me. I obviously never knew the man, but when you grow up in LA, Lakers is a way of life. So that's why I think it seems to hit a lot of people here.
Yeah. Well, it hit a lot of people everywhere. I mean, when a sport as big as basketball, and someone at the level that Kobe Bryant was known for. I mean, I'm not a basketball fan. I don't watch the sport. I didn't know much about him. But, I mean, outside of how tragic it was that him and his daughter and the other people that were in that chopper with him were just going to do something. They were on their way to do something fun together, and it turned into a tragedy. That's just horrible in itself. But, I mean, if you look out here, you can go on social media, and you'll see, I don't know if you went to Bryant Park when you came out to New York City, but it's called Bryant Park. It has nothing to do with Kobe Bryant, but somebody slapped his name right over the name of the park and put a photo up, and it kind of went viral out here in the Northeast anyway. And the Empire State Building, they lit the Lakers colors for him. So, I mean, everybody's feeling it all over.
Yeah, I mean, he went to high school in...
It was tragic. 41. And his daughter, the whole thing with his daughter and those other poor people that were on their way to the same thing with him, the pilot, it just sucks that happened. Josh Sanchez, who writes for Co-Ed Sports, put up a video. He does MMA media out here too, and he put up a video of where Kobe Bryant was talking about how he liked the reason why he liked traveling in helicopters was because it awarded him more time with his daughters to be the dad that he enjoyed being. So stuff like that just makes it more sad to hear. So
yeah, and we'll mourn that and move on, and the world will move on. But I if I take anything from this, and we joke about it sometimes, is these athletes that are fighting for us, or fighting or playing basketball or football, we don't know these people personally. They're giving us memories. I remember watching fights with you, or watching basketball with my dad or my sister or my brother, or going to the fights with my relatives and stuff. It's the memories that they create. So I think that if anything, we step back. We have the situation with Stephen A. Smith, which we joke about, but it's just not that important. I mean, we're watching dudes fight.
Stephen A. Smith is not that important. Why are you bringing him up?
You're right. But I guess what I'm getting at is that the life is a lot more important than these things. So don't let it throw your life off. I mean, you see people getting banned from Twitter for saying stupid stuff, or getting their feelings hurt about because a fighter got bashed. I mean, Dude, it doesn't mean anything. When it's all said and done,
Yeah.
all these people are creating memories. We'll look back at the record books about what they've done in the history of sport that they are in, but it doesn't mean anything. The only thing that really matters is when it's all said and done is life and death. And when something like this happens, I think that it gives you a chance to kind of reflect and go, okay, maybe my priority, maybe Cowboy having his feeling hurt by Stephen A. Smith again is not the end of the damn world. Maybe, you know what I mean? Maybe, so I hate to rant about it, but that's kind of the way I just kind of stepped back for a day and just kind of went, hey.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are
not.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know what I mean?
A lot of people are still stepping back just because of the way that news came out. I mean, you got, we're talking about it. Everyone was talking about it. I mean, Dana White putting pictures up with him and Kobe Bryant, and like you said, it's just because of a lot of these athletes and the sports that we watch, their escapes, they help us escape from the day-to-day, grind and stuff like that pisses us off on the regular. So when you see somebody from that world, gets taken the way they got taken, it's just tragic. But, one thing Kobe Bryant was known for, he was a worker, he was a grinder himself, and I'm sure he wouldn't want us to sit too sad for too long. He'd probably want us all to get back to work and get back to living. So, yeah.
Yeah, no, and I agree with everything you just said. Be curious to see if they have something for him even at the Super Bowl. I wonder if there'll be I bet you the NFL even does something that just tells you where he crossed over to everybody worldwide. So
yeah,
we'll end on that, and we'll have plenty to talk about next week as we prepare for the UFC upcoming card. Fans can follow us at Combat Hour on Twitter, Coast-to-Coast Combat Hour on Instagram, myself at MMA Hawk 21 on Twitter and Instagram. Follow Ed at Carbazol on Twitter and Carbeerzol on Instagram. I have a bunch of photos from Bellator 238. Like I said, I've been kind of out of commission for the last day and a half, but I'm going to try to get some of those posted, and at least get a link to a website if I can't get most of them up on those sites. So keep an eye out for that if you're following me, and talk to you next week, Ed.
Cool.